Hey guys, and welcome to episode 2 in the Python programming series. In this episode, we will finally write our first program. We will do this by learning the most important part of programming basics, which, as you may have guessed from the title, are variables and data types. With that out of the way, let's get right to it. In order to write your first program, you have to install a text editor. The one I recommend you install is called PyCharm. In order to install PyCharm, follow these steps. Go to your browser and type PyCharm download. Click on this first link. Download the community version. You want to download the community version because it is free. Wait for that to download. Once it is downloaded, click the little up arrow and then click open. A little window will pop up asking if it will allow you to make changes to your device. Click yes. And then it'll bring up the setup wizard. Click next. Click next again. You can right click any check marks if you want to. Click next. And then click install. This will install all the packages necessary for PyCharm, as well as PyCharm itself. Once the setup is complete, you will get this screen. Click this check mark that says Run PyCharm Community Edition, and then click Finish. After you click Finish, PyCharm will open. Click the icon to open, agree to the terms and service, and then click continue. For data sharing, you guys can choose whatever you want, but I'm going to click don't send. Now PyCharm will boot up. Once you have arrived at this screen, click new project, and then you can name it whatever you want and change the location. I'm gonna keep it as it is and change the title to Programming Basics, and then change the environment to, actually you can keep the environment how it is, and then click. As long as you have a base interpreter, you want to make sure you have a base interpreter because you have Python installed. And then click create. And it should create a virtual environment for your project to run in. Once you have arrived at this screen, you can test that everything is set up correctly by clicking the green arrow in the top right hand corner. This will run the program. If you see this message pop up, it means you installed everything correctly. You can click the X, and you can also delete all of this. Now we will learn how to write our first program. Now that we have finished with this setup, we are ready to write our first program and learn the first step in programming basics. The first step in programming basics are variables and data types. Variables store data. There are a few different types of data. The first type we will learn is integers. Integers are whole numbers. Now the way we can make a variable in Python is by giving the variable a name. In this case, I'm going to say number. And then if you want, you can add a space for better looks, and then equal sign, and then if you want to add another space, you can, and then the number, which in this case will be 1. Now, we can run it by clicking the arrow in the top right hand corner. You can see it executes. It says process finished with exit code 0. This means it found no errors in the program. Now if we didn't do it correctly, let's say we put a space in our variable, which does not work in Python, it'll give us an error. And when we run this, it'll give us an error saying invalid syntax. This is because you cannot have spaces in your variables. You can have underscores, but you cannot have spaces. Another thing you cannot have is hashtags, as it will generate an error. So now that we have our variable, that's great, but what can we do with it? So one thing we can do with it is print it out. To do this, you can hit enter as many lines as you want, and then type in print, and then open parenthesis, and it should automatically give you a close parenthesis. Now in this close parentheses, we can put in our variable, and you have to type it exactly as it is. So in my case, I will put number. Now if we run this, it'll print out 1 because we set it to 1. If I change this to 15, if I change our number to 15, now when I run it, it'll print out 15 because it says print number, and now it knows that number is 15. That's great, but what is another type? Well, another data type is called string. A string allows you to use any character. So you use the same syntax, number equals to, but instead of put a number, you put quotes. You can either do single quotes or double quotes. Both will work in Python. Now in here, you can put whatever you want. So here, I'll write 1 out in letters, and now when I print number, it'll still print 1, but instead of the number 1, the numerical value, it'll print 1 spelled out. Strings are useful for characters, and you can have multiple characters. Now one thing to note is that you can also give it a numerical value, 12, and it will still print out 12, but the 12 is not an integer, it is a string. One cool trick you can use if you don't know what type it is instead of printing number, you can do print, and then in here, in the parentheses of print, type, and then another set of parentheses, and then in this set of parentheses, you put the variable, number. Now if we run this, you will see it is a class string. str stands for string. But if we change this from 12 in strings to 12 without strings, it'll print integer because now it is an integer. Another cool thing that you can do with print statements is type in the value directly. So if I type in 5, even though number is equal to 12, we're not printing number anymore, we're printing the value 5. So now when we run this, it'll print out 5. We can also do this with strings. This will print 1, because the idea of the print function is that it prints whatever is in these spaces, in between the parentheses. Another cool thing we can do is print multiple things. So here, if I have a number, and then I can add a comma, and then the actual number. And I'll put a colon here, so that now it'll print both. It'll print number, colon, and then the number, because the comma here separates it. So now it'll print multiple things. And we can add another comma and print another thing. But what if you wanted to store multiple values in one variable? Well, there's another data type for that. It's called lists. As an example, we will make a variable called fruits. You declare it the same way, and then after the equals, you put a brackets. Now inside of these brackets can be other elements such as strings or integers. So in here, it'll be a string, and then I can say apples, and then you'd separate it the same way you do in a print statement, comma, and then if you want a space, and then another variable, and you can do as many or as few of them as you want. Here I'll put oranges. So now when I print out fruits, I will see apples and oranges. Another thing you can do is give the list variables. So if here I say fruit equal to bananas, then in here I can give it fruit. So now fruits has apples, bananas, apples, oranges, and fruit, which is bananas. So when I run this, it'll print out apples, oranges, and bananas, because this variable points to this value. Now that you have a general understanding of lists, we can dive deeper, because there are multiple things you can do with lists, and lists are unique as they have multiple items and are a string of items rather than just one. Another thing we can do with lists is add items to them after we have defined the list. So here I can say fruits dot append, and then parentheses, and in these parentheses put what we want to add. In this case, I'll add blueberries, which are in strings. Now if I print this, you won't just see apples, oranges, and bananas, because we have added an item to that, which is blueberries. However, if we put this print function before we append the item, we will only see apples, oranges, and bananas. Why is this? Well, this is because Python is interpreted sequentially, meaning line by line. So first it'll execute the first line, then the next line, then the next line, and we're printing it before we add the item. So to fix this, we'll just put it after. Another thing we can do is remove items. So I can say fruits dot pop, and then here I put the item, then that did not work. Oh, because you have to put the index. So I ran into an error. When you delete items, you have to specify the index. Well, what does this mean? Every item in a list has a number associated with it in the order that it is defined. But you may be thinking, 0, well, there is no 0th item in the list. Well, not for humans, but computers start counting from 0. So the 0th item will be apples, the first will be oranges, the second will be bananas, the third, when appended, will be blueberries. However, then we remove the 0th item, which in this case is apples. So it'll print oranges, bananas, and blueberries because we removed apples. Now, when you add an item that is too far out of the index, you will get an error because there aren't 11 items in the list. There were only 4 up until this point, which is why we get an error. Show you that this works multiple times. So 0 works. 0 will get rid of apples. 1 will get rid of oranges. 2 will get rid of bananas. And 3 will get rid of blueberries. One last cool thing we can do with lists is index them to find a specific value. So to print a specific item in the list, how would we do this? Well, we would print out fruits, but then we will add square brackets here, and then specify our index. Remember how I was telling that 0 is the first, then 1, then 2. So if I print fruits, square bracket, 0, square bracket, this will print out apples because it's fruit at the index of 0, which is apples. Fruits at the index of 1 won't be apples, it'll be oranges. Another thing you can do is instead of using just strings, you can also have numbers. So when I print out not the 0th, not the 1st, not the 2nd, but the 3rd item in the list, I will get 2. Similar to how you modify lists, you can also modify variables. So if I have name equal to Aaron, I print name. Let's say I decided to change it later to Josh. Now, when I print it, it'll print the old name because that's what we've set it to, and when it changes to the new name, it'll print the new name. You can also do this for integers. However, a really cool thing you can do with integers is change it by a certain amount. So let's say high score is equal to 100. If we're coding a game, when the player reaches a new high score, we'll want to modify it. So high score equals high score plus 10. So now when we print high score, it'll equal 110 because high score is equal to what it was before plus 10. But this looks a bit long, so how would we write this to do the same thing but make it shorter? Well, we can write this as high score plus equals 10. Now, this will do the same thing. What this means is high score equals to itself plus 10. Now, if we change this to 1, it'll be 101 because 100, which is high score, plus 1 equals 101. So everyone, that's it for this video. I hope you learned something and found it helpful. Until next time, I'll see you guys later. Bye.